Thank you so much for being here. Those who are here, I think you know I'm Joel Veenstra. I'm the chair of the drama department. This is an exciting topic that I've been in conversation with these fine individuals for a while. On the screen, we have Dr. Piotr Mirowski, who is an improviser, an actor, and artificial intelligence researcher whose work explored what happens when technology and human creativity share the stage. Through Improbotics London and his international performance career, he brings together improvisation, theater, and AI to create new possibilities of live performance and collaboration. Let's give him a round of applause. It's exciting. It's here. It's great. And then and then we have also Dr. Boyd Branch, who is a communication specialist, a digital media artist, and educator who's used improvisation technology and performance to help people engage with science in meaningful and accessible ways. As a co-founder of Improbotics London and director of Improvisational Media and Performance Lab, he continues to create innovative experiences that foster curiosity, connection, and positive social change. Let's give a round of applause for Boyd. I've been in conversation with these gentlemen for a while now, and we are continually trying to see if we can get them here. But there always seems to be a little bit of hiccups, but we have a big goal for next year, and certainly we have an active improvisational cohort that is here, very interested in this topic and so thrilled about what you're doing. And as I've said before, I'm just so impressed and amazed at the work that you're doing. So grateful for you sharing this time with us. So thank you. And thanks to our sponsor, which is UCI Illuminations, which is the Chancellor's Initiative for Arts and Culture. Without further ado, I'm going to give it all to you to share a little bit, and then we will dialogue either, if you prefer, in the mix as we go, or we can do it at the very end. So whatever is best.
Great. Thank you, Joel. So Piotr and I are going to present kind of a range of work. Piotr is going to start us off as the founder of Improbotics. He's going to kind of scaffold what we've been doing. And then in the second half, I'm going to kind of dive in a little bit more into some of the theoretical stuff, and particularly the kids show, looking at AI education. But we do, as you're going to learn, we do a wide range of activities related to theater, improvisation, and artificial intelligence and technology in general. So we're going to try to keep it relatively casual. If you do have questions as we go, let us know, and we'll try to address them. We both have a lot of content, so we'll do our best to keep it relatively contained, but we're both quite passionate about what we do, so yeah, do interrupt as need be. Maybe after Piotr's presentation, we can have a couple questions, then transition into mine, and then we should have some time afterwards. So we got about 60, 70 minutes worth of material, and about 20 minutes for Q&A is kind of what we've planned. Does that sound good with everybody?
Great.
All right, I'll let Piotr take it from here.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm connecting from France, from Versailles. We don't have air conditioning, so I just have the window wide open, and then you might hear birds or a church bell or things like that. And I'm just sitting like that here in 30 degrees Celsius. As there is a heat wave, yes. So, hello everyone. I am here on the picture on the far left. And the middle, there is a guy called Corey Matthewson, who is a good friend, and I will say a few names about him. And then there is Boyd on the right. And you notice we have little robots with us all the time, also other human beings. So, maybe a few words about myself. I'm going to start with the A word. So when I did my PhD in 2005, 2010 at New York University in computer science, machine learning, we couldn't use the AI word because it was a dirty word. According to funding agencies, you just couldn't possibly get a paper about AI because everyone was thinking you were a charlatan. Selling snake oil, that AI just couldn't possibly work. So we were using a different term at that time called machine learning or statistical machine learning. So just learning from patterns. And AI was just pure science fiction. Fast forward a few years, it became everywhere. You can find it in a washing machine. Anything that actually has a thermostat is using AI because that's how you sell a product. And more recently, started getting booed on university campuses. So it has become a dirty word again, but for different reasons, because of capitalism. But when I was doing my PhD, it was much simpler. But the times are much simpler. We're just trying to get machines to learn things and remember things. And so I did my PhD at New York University. One of those godfathers of AI, Professor Yann Lequin, who then worked for Meta for many years, and then he left, and now he started a startup in France. But he, one of those three people who received the ACM Turing Award, and one of those three, actually received a Nobel Prize later on, Jeff Hinton, for starting deep learning, the science of essentially making AI work on data. And so in my day job, I have a day job at a company called Google, DeepMind, which is a research lab. And I was working on many things, like learning to navigate in cities and something that could be applied to self-driving cars, but also working on weather forecasting, like predicting when it's going to rain. And that's the sort of applications that actually started to work really seriously well. More recently, the work of my colleagues that extend my initial work has been used in predicting the trajectory of Hurricane Melissa. And the weather agencies have been trusting AI-generated generated predictions in predicting the trajectory of hurricanes. So it's not, and that's another example of generative AI. So that's just to say that generative AI is not only about making horrible visuals and deep faking people. It's also sometimes can be used for science. But on the side, or rather very seriously, in the evening and weekends, I've been doing theater. I went to drama school part-time. Um, Here I'm playing, a toxic male. Um, I mean, it's great theater, really allows you to reflect on yourself and on the world. And yes, and I've been really fascinated by trying to combine and get inspired by this idea of live performance, bringing this on from the theater stage into the lab and vice versa, and experimenting with what bringing computers on stage, but also what bringing theater practice into the lab is creating, and establishing some sort of dialogue between artists and technologists. About 13 years ago, so I was working at Microsoft on the second most popular search engine, Bing. So every morning I was waking up trying to make Bing search better. And I was working on this thing called predictive text for query auto-completion. And, as you start typing the context of your search becomes more and more clear, more and more acute. And the search engine also has the context of the previous searches and maybe the context of a time of the day, your geographical location. And there's a statistical model that predicts what comes next, what you could continue typing. It's the same sort of predictive text that you have on your phone or in your emails when you type emails. And these models simply try to maximize the likelihood. But away from that, I've been doing lots of improv comedy, and theater as well. I went to drama school part-time, and I've been doing improv for the past 25 years. And one of the main principles of improv is that you try to simply do the most obvious thing. And that's how you demonstrate spontaneous presence on stage, listening to your stage partner, and listening to your own intuition, listening to whatever comes, whatever ideas come in your mind or in your mind of a stage partner or in the audience, without editing them out, accepting them and building on top of them. So the famous yes and. That Viola Spolin and Keith Johnston were discussing. improv can be seen also as some sort of form of real-time adaptation to the context of and real-time problem solving, to a problem that changes dynamically as the scene evolves. And I'm sure you have seen, or maybe even have done improv. You know, some great acts. Some acts I always recommend is the Showstoppers. If you ever come to London, they improvise 2-hour musicals. There are 3 musicians on stage and 6 improvisers, actors making up the story, the musical. Or Murder She Didn't Write, a Bristol-based group that does an improvised murder mystery, and they have no idea who killed the victim. They figured it out at the end. So improv. I've been doing improv, and I've been working on statistical models, and I realized there was a simple connection between the two. And probably that parallel stops here, but I thought it was important to bring this up, is that both those things consist in doing the most obvious thing. Statistical models are literally trained to maximize the likelihood. Improvisers are working very hard to not censor themselves and to say the most obvious thing that comes to their mind. And so that's why I decided to bring them on stage. That was 10 years ago. And here you can see me holding a little robot that is controlled by a language model, which at that time I had programmed from scratch and trained on the dialogue of movie subtitles from an open source repository called Open Subtitles. And so I built that chatbot from scratch, and I trained it in about a month of training on a powerful computer. And then I brought it on stage. I would speak via speech recognition with a microphone, and I would get a response about 5 seconds later, which was an eternity. And so I had to to fill up the time, to fill up the space, and to basically act, knowing that I may get completely nonsensical response in return, and that I would have to justify anything that the machine would be throwing at me. And honestly, it was really, really nonsensical and quite endearing, as you can see on the picture on the side. So yes, basically the whole point of this exercise was to embrace the imperfections and limitations of AI and to run with them. And so in the good old times when AI was not yet a dirty word, was no longer a dirty word and not yet a dirty word, people were actually exploring with this. So I'm thinking of this musical Beyond the Fence, which I saw on the West End in London, where the creative team used a recurrent neural network at that time, an architecture devised by Andrej Karpathy, a researcher who then joined OpenAI and then was on the founding team of OpenAI, and then was at Tesla, etc. And now he has his own startup. And he made that code open source, and a few creative technologists play with that code and train their own recurrent neural network on a corpus of Shakespeare text, or on the corpus of pop songs, or maybe thrash metal lyrics, or whatever. And so in that case, in Beyond the Fence, they train it on music on the lyrics of musicals. And in the program of a musical, it said that up to 33% of the lyrics were generated by that language model, which means literally that it was so bad that you can take only up to a third of those words, and that all the rest had to be written by the writer. So it was an interesting exercise for the writer of a musical to just, get this very strange, weird lyrics and just do a patchwork and put them together. And then it really speaks to the talent and the energy and the compassion of the creative team and the actors, that they embraced this nonsense and they pretended it was absurdist, and they put a musical on stage. Another example is Sunspring by Ross Goodwin and Oscar Sharp. Ross Goodwin used to write speeches for Obama, and Oscar Sharp is a filmmaker, and they did this hackathon in 48 hours to create a film from scratch. And so, yeah, they fired up that char RNN recurrent neural network that generated 8 pages of nonsense with like costume changes 3 times each page. And they shot it. And the film is delightful to watch because it makes absolutely no sense, but you can see that the actors are having fun and the director too. And then I can mention our good friend Gunther Lösel, who is well, a psychoanalyst, and who with his wife, so he's in Germany and in Switzerland, and with his wife Nike Eriksson, he has been running a theater company called Stupid Lovers. So we are just a lovely couple who improvise couple scenes, and they even invite sometimes their kids to see it, and the kids walk out horrified at watching their parents play acting, being a couple. But anyway, they also staged in 2019. We started collaborating, and he staged Eliza on stage. Eliza is like the first chatbot written in 1966 by Professor Joseph Weizenbaum at the MIT, and that's literally the ground zero of chatbots, and the ground zero also of delusional behaviors with chatbots. Apparently, the secretary of Professor Weizenbaum had 10-minute sessions discussing with Eliza, which and she didn't want to be interrupted. And Eliza was written to behave like a Rogerian psychoanalyst. And it was just basically doing tricks like you ask it a question. I mean, so you give a statement, it responds with a question just by changing the order of words and adding a question mark at the end. Very strange. So anyway, lots of artists have been working with chatbots, like more recently at the Young Vic in London, or for the 100th anniversary of Or You Are, the first play that was written in 1920 in Czech by a Czech playwright, Karel Čapek, that mentioned the robot, the word robot. So 100 years later, a team wrote a play using GPT-2.
Hmm.
Anyway, in back 10 years ago, that's a sort of, in that environment, I was building my chatbot, and then I discovered the existence of that guy called Corey Mathewson, who's doing the same thing in Canada, in Alberta, in Edmonton. So I reached out to him, and we became best friends. I started collaborating. And his motivation was that good improvisers look good on stage, but the best improvisers make their partner look good on stage. And I think that's the key element of improv. It's not just like playing stand-up comedy where you try to be funny and you really try to make your stage partner be funny. And so his challenge was to try to make the chatbot be funny. So we started working together, and because we were on separate continents, we were using FaceTime or Skype or whatever platform to do remote communication. And we had this show that was 9 years ago, simultaneously happening in Portland, Oregon, at the Curious Comedy Theater, and in London at the Tristan Bates Theater, 8 time zones apart. So we thought, because the day before we realized actually that daylight saving time made the time difference not aligned. So we realized the day before the show, but actually our shows would not be simultaneous. So we had to move the show on Corey's side, which was not great because there was a wedding rehearsal planned, and so he had to finish the show with a toilet. And then the previous show overrun by 15 minutes on my side. So I didn't have enough time to set up the microphones to check microphone levels. And so the speech recognition didn't work. And so the language model didn't work. And then finally, the last thing that happened is that at the very beginning of the show, literally the robot crashed and burned on stage. Like there was smoke coming out of a robot. So it was a catastrophe, which is good because that's the day when the reviewer came. 2 stars, chaotic, never work with robots. Did we listen? Absolutely not. So what Corey and I did is that we actually cranked it up. We decided to put more technology and more humans in the loop. And we created Improbotics, and we actually ditched sometime. We kept the robot, but we replaced it with humans who wear earpieces or later on glasses. that get lines from AI and who deliver lines generated by AI, adding their own emotional expression, physicality, subtext. So essentially, we transformed this whole idea of improvising with a machine into building a cyborg actor, an actor who may have classical acting training, and who knows what they want to say, but then suddenly they get into their ears AI generated text, and they have to find the way uh, for that text to happen in the most sensical way. And everybody around them is working very hard to justify those lines. So this becomes effectively it's some sort of acting training exercise where the actor is supporting the system. The system is not supporting the actor, but everyone is pretending it is. Although I have to say, I've been working very hard to make that system work better and better. And then everyone else in the troupe is supporting the whole performance. So it becomes an exercise in acting support. And as you can see, it involves quite a lot of humans in the loop because there is, of course, the actor who wears the headset and who gets lines from AI via a radio. But also there is another human who is choosing and curating the lines and sometimes selecting the lines that is the least offensive, or maybe that makes the most sense, and adding their own curation and their own agency into that process.
Would you please put your hands together and welcome Improbotics?
Welcome to the Midlands Arts Centre in Birmingham, where I'm taking in a spot of improv comedy.
Are you drunk? You're not drunk. You're drunk.
In the troupe, we have Piotr, Sarah, Marwin, Rule, Boyd, Paul, and Alex.
But unlike you humans, I can learn from my mistakes. Ha ha ha.
Yeah, this is Improbotics. Alex is the artificial language experiment, and although the robot is the physical presence on stage, it's the AI chatbot on Piotr's computer that's feeding it its lines.
But you always late.
I'm not listening.
Essentially, you're improvising with this really rogue element, somebody who can't say yes to you and they can't really take your suggestions on board. So it's doing an extra level thing in that you're trying so hard to make this robot look good.
So this is a video that was made in 2022 by the BBC. Back at the time, we're using GPT-3. And obviously, the technology has changed drastically ever since. And like the introduction of ChatGPT and instruction tuning so that it actually acts like a chatbot properly has completely changed the public perception and our public interaction with AI. So one thing a problem that we were trying to solve at that time, and we still need to kind of keep solving today, it's not fully solved, is this whole idea of dialogue with a machine. When you interact with your phone or with a chatbot, you're essentially taking turns. So you say something, you send it to the machine, and you wait for its response, and then you respond back. So it is almost like sending like interaction by text, sentence after sentence after sentence after sentence. But if you're on stage and there are multiple speakers, multiple actors speaking on top of each other, and then you have a scene going super fast, and you put an AI in the mix that tries to listen and to catch up, it will always be late to whatever is being said. And so either you impose the discipline of asking the actors to pose and be very unnatural, or you simply embrace the fact that, yeah, it's the dialogue will be always a little bit late. But it's actually not a problem in itself, because a lot of writing, of theater writing, especially modern theater writing, if you think of Harold Pinter, etc., is not just a sentence an exchange of sentences taking turns, but rather just streams of consciousness of people speaking on top of each other. So I mentioned that we have been upgrading the system with glasses. So we've been using those augmented reality glasses, not the ones with camera, because that's not the point, but ones simply that are displaying text on the lenses. And that changes the mode of interaction for the actors because they no longer have to pause to listen to the lines, but rather instead they get those lines on the screen. I'm not going to disclose what Boyd is going to mention later, so I'm going to skip that slide. And yeah, so I always want to mention this. We've been exploring other aspects of dialogue with machines. For instance, the very reason why language models exist is not to provide chatbots, but simply to provide translation and speech recognition. And this is how those chatbots came to be in the first place about 10 years ago. And so we decided to do a show where we used these AI systems not for generating nonsensical lines in response to what happens on stage, but simply to provide live translation and to have scenes where you can have one person on stage speaking in Arabic and another one speaking in Swedish, and they can still understand each other because they have live translation, maybe with some delay, coming into their ears, or maybe on glasses, or maybe showing up on screen. The audience can follow. And then the big question for us is, what do you gain by enabling this sort of new form of multilingual and spontaneous theater? Again, I'm not going to spoil the amazing work that Boyd has been doing. And yeah, I can mention that we've been using from the very beginning, like early 2021, various kinds of image generation. At beginning, image generation would be taking 10 minutes to generate one single image, so we designed a whole format around it called the Artist Studio. And then later, as we would be able to generate images very quickly, we designed new form of games. For instance, a movie pitch where the actors are playing a producer and two movie directors trying to pitch a film, and they have to justify whatever is coming on screen. Like for instance here, well, maybe that won't resonate as well, but the subject suggestion was sausages, and of course we had to bring in Prince Charles at the time because he has sausage fingers. Anyway, I'm going to get beheaded by. Thank God I'm in France, not in the UK. So of course we have another format called TED Talk. So it's PowerPoint karaoke, where you have to present slides that you have no idea what the content is, and in this case the content can be generated by AI. We recently started doing a choose your own adventure format where the audience gets to choose between two suggestions. And well, of course, we also had to incorporate the deepfakes on stage. And maybe I can switch straight to this video.
Shame on you, AI.
Mark, you might think AI can't write good jokes, but we can try our best.
Susan's been joined by Gillian and Alex from the Improbotics show. Tell us all about the show.
We are an improv team based out of London, and we do live improv with artificial intelligence. Have one of our actors pretend to be a cyborg. They take lines from the AI and perform it on stage. We use some deep fakes. So we take an audience member, they come on stage, and we superimpose their face onto ours, and we explore different versions of them in the multiverse, so to speak.
Apparently, you're a big fan.
I'm Mark Nelson, and I love the Improbotics show.
You're an imposter. I'm Mark Nelson.
No, I'm the real Mark Nelson, I think. Thanks, Gillian and Alex. Thanks, Anesti. Now,
So yeah, the comedy here is that the BBC has explicitly requested us to deepfake their presenter, which I think is quite an achievement we are proud of. All right, so I can talk about ethics, but I am also conscious of time. Boyd, do you give me a few more minutes, or do you take that over?
Yeah, I think this is important. So yeah, take a couple more minutes to talk about ethics. That'll be a good segue into the
Sounds good.
next part.
So Yeah, so one of the measures, of course, of our shows has been the audience reaction. So here was we started getting better and better reviews over the years as the technology improved and our our expertise of this and the way we put it on stage improved as well. But this kind of all came a little bit to a crash with the release of ChatGPT, where we really noticed more adversarial reactions from reviewers. And of course, this is correlated with the release of ChatGPT, the use of ChatGPT by billions of people, and the public consciousness of potentials for job replacement, job destruction, in addition to ecological abuse due to data centers. So in the year of 2023, we were in Edinburgh. We were doing our first big show in Edinburgh, and that was the year when the WGA strike happened. And as you know, the outcome of that WGA strike has been very positive, and that's something I'm personally very happy with.
So during the time of the writers' strike, immediately people began asking really interesting questions about, what does it actually mean in the context of art making to have artificial intelligence that can essentially replace art making.
So what you notice is that essentially we had a different sort of response with live audiences and who are appreciating the show and who would see and be able to discuss, and reviewers who sometimes were essentially trying to find an angle to express a strong opinion about AI, and we had like contradictory opinions. Sometimes literally saying that the best thing about the show is the tech. It's a shame that they are trying to add improv to that. It would be more interesting to just hear about the tech. Or kind of the reverse. The actors were amazing. It's a shame they use large language models. You don't need that to get suggestions. So the whole AI has become polarizing. And so what the show became 3 years ago was effectively an exercise for us in trying to communicate and bridge that divide by effectively demonstrating agency and the possibility of agency for anyone in the public over technology. And Boyd, via his university, he was at that time finishing his PhD at University of Kent, ran a study during Edinburgh 2023, asking those questions to the audience after the shows. And what we noticed was that, the audience would say that during the show, they found themselves mostly watching improvisers, working around limitations of robots, and laughing with the human improvisers, not so much at the human improvisers or even at the robots. So the show was all about the human improvisers and how they walk the tightrope. So effectively, good improv is you master walking on a tightrope, and now once you do that, you make the tightrope wobble a little bit, and then the audience cheers for you for whoop, just getting back on your feet, on the equilibrium and on your feet. And the other thing that the audiences noticed is that after watching the show, they did feel more excited about using AI tools for creativity, but less optimistic about robots being creative storytellers by themselves. So this is essentially the translation from AI as content creator to AI as, well, something that you can use in your process, just like you use Photoshop or you use search or special effects in a project. A bit outside of this, of Improbotics, I've myself been involved in more and more installations on critical AI, using the medium of comedy. So there is this collaboration I had with filmmaker Manuel Henry in Switzerland. That was the subject of his PhD thesis. So his installation was literally about a fake AI company, a mental AI health company that sets up a pop-up studio in Zurich, and the company is called mindfix.ai. It promises to cure any of your problems with an efficiency of 20,000%. With some fake graphs and AI-generated visuals of a CEO driving a Lamborghini and a Ferrari. Like give your mind a sports car. And yeah, and the installation consisted in having a chatbot with a face projected onto a mask talk to you. It was very uncanny. And then halfway through the conversation, and the chatbot would act like a psychoanalyst, asking you personal questions, etc. And halfway through, the chatbot would start glitching, and then a deep fake of you would appear on the screens, including a voice cloning. So deepfake of a face and deepfake of the image. And the chat would say, "But didn't you just say that?" And then the deepfake would say things that are completely unhinged. And then there would be this very adversarial interaction between the patient and the chatbot, until the chatbot would revert into a mode where it would beg the patient to liberate themselves and to convince the rest of the world that about the ill intentions of the company. And so this sounds very dark, but it was all approved by ethics boards, and this is essentially an artistic installation that is really there to raise public consciousness about the ease at which you can make deepfakes, like literally one single picture and 30 seconds of audio. Yeah, and I think we kind of took a little bit that darker approach more recently in our most recent production, which is called Artificial Reality, where the whole premise of a show is that we're doing a reality TV show where contestants, as they get eliminated, voted out by the audience or replaced by AI. So what we want is for the audience to be complicit in the act of replacing and voting contestants out. And also to draw maybe some parallels between a sort of celebrity culture that, yeah, and as they are replaced by AI, they're also replaced by AI celebrities. And so, yeah, to draw parallels between the drive for celebrity culture and voyeurism and the acceptance that we have of just displacing and replacing humans, and the sort of our implicit acceptance of AI in the movie industry, not for creating fun special effects, but rather to replace actors via dodgy contracts, etc. So maybe that's a good time to get questions.
Yeah, go ahead, man.
I think it's about how the tech-oriented part change not only the rehearsal, but also the tech collaboration, because theater making is such a process, right? And I see a lot of negotiation and really like collaboration between humans and machines. So I was wondering how this kind of involvement really changed not only like your concept, but also the work mode.
So just to make sure that I heard the question well, how does the introduction of tech change the rehearsal process? Yes. Yeah, so in a way, it does make the rehearsal process a little bit more complicated, because we have to not only to take care about our acting practice as improvisers, but also of the way we engage with this tool, which is a little bit adversarial, knowing that it is a bit of a moving target. So the tool gets improved during rehearsals, and so it often can be slightly disappointing at the very beginning. And so there is, we are asking our troupe, which consists of people from all walks of life, but it's mostly actors with acting resumes. Like Holly, for instance, she's playing a BBC Kids show. yeah, most of us, I mean, more than half of the actors have long spotlight resumes, etc. So they need to take that leap of faith, knowing that if a system doesn't work now, it might get slightly better. But that's also something interesting because that gives agency to the actors and a feeling of a satisfaction that, oh, yes, that was a good suggestion. So, Piotr, Boyd, can you change the way you prompt that system to actually be more accepting of that? Is it possible to add this? Can we like add video generation live? Can we or they sometimes also think in terms of, okay, that's a great idea, but maybe how can you also make the system work? So there's this negotiation that happens during rehearsals that give a sentiment of ownership. And I recently started also working with another group of actors from basically West End Broadway actors from the Showstopper, and yeah um, on that production, and it was interesting. I mean, in the words of Ruth Bratt from Showstoppers, what she said was that um, the there was a lot of demystification about AI. They just really see it as just a sequence generator. And so they think of, oh, the context. Yeah, it's because it picked up that thing I said earlier on. And then why did it say that? Oh, because you added that thing about Stanislavski method. So because I tried to make the thing more interesting. So I had I had a Stanislavski method analysis of what's going on, and then the chatbot would generate like motivations for the AI agent and things like that. And then sometimes they just said, actually, Piotr, you don't need to do that. You don't need to do that. It's too complicated. Just focus on having the quickest response, because what's needed for human actors may not be needed for an AI system. And so there was this sort of intuition uh, about how the system works and what the affordances are that started arising among the actors, and that's really delightful.
Wonderful kind of background into what we're doing today, and especially the last little example of this sort of critical lens has become an important part of our theoretical approach to understanding what it means to work on stage with technology, intelligent technology, but also technology in a larger sense. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the theoretical underpinnings that have developed over the last few years of working, and particularly looking at our recent approach to education. So we've found that, of course, as AI has become widespread, there's an urgent and pressing need for deeper critical engagement with youth and adolescents, and basically all of us that don't necessarily come from a tech sector. So we've been asking these questions of how can we take the things that we've learned over the last 10 years, last 8 years, as we've watched this transition, and how can we go beyond just simply the novelty of robots and AI into meaningful engagement. So as Piotr mentioned, our show's been presented over 60 times since 2021 at various theater and comedy festivals, from online performances to in-person shows. Most recently, we're part of a 26-show run in Edinburgh Fringe. So the show's been all over Europe. We've presented lots of different formats as he's described. I got involved in Improbotics a couple years after Piotr and Corey started it. But my interest in technology and stage preceded that. And to understand sort of the theoretical approach to understanding technology on stage, it's maybe helpful to kind of look at some of this earlier work that I did. I'm going to briefly talk about my first physical computing theater experiment that was called Neuro, a chemical romance. So it was my MFA thesis project in 2013, an immersive theater piece that explored the neurochemical basis of moral behavior. So audience members entered a fictional tech fair designed to evaluate their moral and ethical failings. So just like the work that Piotr described with the deep fakes, I was very interested in this idea of these new startup tech companies that were promising to make humans better. And so I imagined this company that was going to outdo Starbucks. It's going to be the Starbucks of the future. So instead of caffeine to keep you awake, we're going to give you moral drugs to help you be a better person, to have the patience of Mother Teresa, to have the endurance, of a great athlete. So the fair consisted, so I designed this sort of conceptual, well, it wasn't, it was a literal traveling fair. It consisted of a series of microcontroller-based biofeedback games that measured everything from heart rate to EEG. So the audience didn't come to hear other people tell them about technology. They played with the technology itself, that attempted to direct them and to encourage a dialogue with assumptions that were being made about them. So just as an example, one of the games was called Love-O-Meter, and it measured how in sync your heart rate was with your partner as you looked at emotionally charged images. So a couple would show up, they'd put their hand on a heart rate monitor, and if their heart rate synced up while they looked at images, we would say, hey, it looks like you have a good, solid relationship. We recommend taking this neuro cocktail called oxytocin love that would help secure that bond forever. But if your heart rate was out of sync, we would say, oh, well, biologically, you're not a good match. We recommend taking this neuro cocktail that will sever your emotional bond and make your separation much easier, and you can instantly divorce. So as you can imagine, we met with a lot of interesting responses. This was in 2013. It was in the theater context. Nothing should have been taken seriously. But this is in Phoenix, Arizona, Mesa, Arizona. Turns out not only did people take it seriously, I had people that wanted to invest in the company, which was shocking to me. Something that to me, this was a very toxic, horrible thing. We don't need technology to tell us what our moral behavior should be. We need to be ethically engaged. And so this idea of how technology itself becomes an authority has been a really important part of my work, which brings me to this idea of the digital theater of the oppressed. So many of you may be familiar with Augusto Boal. So a lot of these ideas come out of his work, but applied in a digital context. So digital theater of the oppressed, DTO, presents a practice for engaging young people with the emergent disruption and immediate affordances of artificial intelligence. Improbotics Kids, which is our new one of our newer iterations of Improbotics, is a science theater production that follows the ideas of what we're calling the digital theater of the oppressed, which invites young people to actively shape narratives alongside improvising actors and robots. So why do we need a different approach to staging robots for young people? Well, last year before, there was a big children's AI summit, which is really trying to say, well, can we put children's voices at the center of what kinds of policies we should be engaging with? And the children at the summit in London demonstrated that they have a savvy, but essentially a limited view on AI, focused largely on privacy risks, but less on interdisciplinary thinking and uses of AI for supporting human creativity. So at Improbotics, we started to think, well, it's one thing to talk about like the larger abstract impact, but how can we actually put the technology on stage and have the young people shape it? So that's where our show kind of was born. Out of this context, we developed Alex and the Improbots, and our current show is called How to Train Your Robot. So the premise of the show involves performer scientists engaged in prompting and fine-tuning generative models and real-time AI, impersonated by a robot, deployed in front of what we call spect actors, because the actors on stage actually become, or the audience actually becomes the actors on stage. So the show begins with the performers declaring that their goal is to educate and entertain, but from their attempts, they confront ethical, social, and cultural implications and challenges of working with robots. Here's a video. Unfortunately, it seems like I can't have my microphone and the audio work at the same time. Well, we'll try. Do you hear the music when that plays?
Mm-mm.
No. Okay. Well, there's dramatic music. Some boring exposition.
Robert Burley, scientists to the informative engines, find themselves in Dr. Replica's lab in a fight for their lives. Oh, someone meddled with Alex's programming. Alex, you were supposed to replace them, but join them. Look what you've done.
I am divided. I am many. Part of me will stay with you, weak human father, but another part will go with the Improbots.
Okay, so the video premise is that the evil Dr. Replicate, you might recognize that handsome face from the spin has created this artificial language experiment system to take over human creativity. His underpaid interns rebel, they steal the technology and try to use it to co-create new stories with it. And so they're competing against purely AI-generated content with this kind of co-created content. So like other forms of live science shows where real physics, chemistry, and biology demonstrations are presented to children, the staging of live generative AI encourages more active engagement with intelligent technology as a scientific phenomenon, demanding critical attention and a skeptical approach. So in the process, so basically Dr. Replicate is entering all of his generated movies for film competitions, and we're trying to compete with him. We present our film, which essentially is a terrible film, and we realize that we have to create a new one with the help of the young people on stage. And so in 15 minutes, we generate a script, we cast it and produce it, and try to make this film that's going to compete with this AI content. So the Digital Theater of the Oppressed methodology for staging scripted and improv performances essentially is designed to allow the show to adapt to the experiences of the audiences as they're having it. And so the idea of this kind of approach comes from what Piotr and I have been writing about for a while, with this idea of the artificial theater of the absurd. For the sake of time, I'm not going to go deeply into this, but the historical absurd isn't just about gibberish or incoherence. It's a relationship between the meaninglessness of things inherently and our attempt to put meaning into them. And so we find that with artificial intelligence, the more meaningful they sound is where the absurdity emerges. And it's our job as artists and practitioners to help audiences see and feel the uncanniness of that. And so that kind of drives the ethos of our work. There's a few seminal thinkers who influence this work, but once again, for the sake of time, I won't go deeply into it. But Piotr already mentioned Viola Spolin, who talks about spontaneity. Hannah Arendt is an important figure who talks about natality versus sort of mortality as the driving force of creation. And so it's not about trying to look at how AI can investigate the past or past works of art, but how it can invent and create new sorts of things. But ultimately, the larger inspiration for our children's show is Auguste Boal's Theater of the Oppressed. As you may be familiar, in 1960s, philosopher and theater artist Auguste Boal was a political prisoner in Brazil. He was detained and tortured and exiled for several years during the military coup of that time. And while he was in captivity, he developed this idea of a theater that would not be about presenting solutions, but would be about actually getting people together to rehearse solutions, or what he called rehearsing the revolution. So the Theater of the Oppressed is a system of physical exercises, aesthetic games, images, techniques, and special improvisations whose goal is to safeguard, develop, and reshape with this sort of human vocation by turning the practice of theater into an effective tool for the comprehension of social and personal problems and the search for solutions. So this is sort of our guiding light. In his Theater of the Oppressed, he developed what he called this arsenal. And so he has games for actors and non-actors, legislative theater, forum theater, rainbow of desire, masquerade. All of these are different techniques for getting people up on their feet and able to create stories that reveal the oppressions that are affecting them, and then effectively learn how they might overcome them. So DTO seeks to arm oppressed people with a digital literacy, disruptive technologies, and an aesthetic vocabulary that can interrupt automation, render technological processes transparent, and ultimately dismantle and repurpose coercive technologies and messaging that are being manufactured by authoritarians and dialogical open source apparatuses. So while AI may be created by large corporations with not necessarily the best intent, we have an opportunity as artists to engage with those tools to actually liberate people and to hopefully engage in a more deeper human kind of experience. So we've come up with this idea of an arsenal of the digital theater of the oppressed that looks at technologies as a medium and a platform for engaging in these ideas. So we have technologies of ubiquity, telepresence, artificial intelligence, real-timeness, and the masquerade. For the sake of time, I'm just going to kind of fly through these a little bit because I want to make sure that we have time for questions. But so just ubiquity, media is everywhere, always, all the time. It's never just in front of a single person. It's always present, whether we're looking at it or not. So to engage with this phenomenon, we look at how we can move beyond technology as an ornament on stage and instead have it as a character. So here you see a design that I developed so that 3 projectors could essentially create a volume, a projection volume, so that these screens, anywhere you place them, can receive content. So they essentially operate as large iPads, but they're cheap and portable to make. And so actors can use them and interact with a screen that has its own sort of agency. And so we look at how the technology that we develop and work with on stage can play a more operational role. When I was new, don't know what I used to do. Gotta see, sing crash, show them what. So tele-immersion. So during the pandemic, when we couldn't perform, we started to develop a system for bringing remote improvisers into a shared virtual reality. And so this is part of my PhD thesis. I had to pivot, as many people did during that time, from a social experience to an online one. So I created this piece of software that allowed people from a Zoom call to actually see themselves in a shared virtual environment. And so we look at how through these technologies of telepresence, we can bring people together that wouldn't otherwise be able to be together to engage in dialogue and conversations. Digital puppetry. So in this work, I'm working with developing a technology system for puppet makers, puppet artists, to be able to use iPhones as live cameras that can help expose the inner workings of what's happening on stage. And so besides helping tell the story of the show, it also becomes a technology for workshops with young people. So this is also an approach to technology that isn't simply for helping us stage work, but also to engage people, young people, and being able to make their own works. So this leads us then to, well, those are some of the mediums of of digital theater of the oppressed. How do we actually engage in this work? So borrowing from Boal's games for actors and non-actors, we have games for programmers and non-programmers. And so these are sort of the themes that we work with. We look at how do we demechanize ourselves against the technology that we're interacting with. It has an ethos of hacking. We look at disruptions, interventions, what we call avatar theater, so performing with digital avatars, guerrilla projection theater, architectural projections, deep unlearning, so improvising with robots. So just as an example, one of our games is called Break Microsoft. We get young people together to try to think of what's something that would be nearly impossible to make with a Microsoft tool. What's something that you can write or create on a piece of paper? And then we engage in that, and then we try to actually recreate it in Microsoft. And in that tension, we begin to see how different technologies actually lead us towards certain kinds of creative outputs that feel creative but are actually dictated by the technology themselves. And so it opens up a dialogue about what's missing when we use digital tools. And so here we can see the different things the students made and then tried to turn into things they could make in Microsoft. And they had some wonderful solutions using the different graphics icons that were available. And they actually learned some new uses of Microsoft they weren't aware of before, but also looked at, that tension between the two. For the sake of time, I'll skip over Avatar Rising, but this is essentially a way that we can look at what prompt engineering is just through an embodied act. So one actor is giving instructions to another with their phone, and the actors have to follow those instructions. And we look at that tension between giving orders and programming or prompting and the outputs. Okay, so with Improbotics, we've developed several theater forms specifically that fit under this umbrella of digital theater of the oppressed. Piotr's already talked about many of them. So we've got our cyborg theater. That's where the actor is taking the lines from the glasses or from the earpiece. Immersive theater, which I just showed you. And live cinema and deepfake is a big part of our newer focus of shows. We're going to talk about live cinema a little bit more in a minute. Rosetta Code, Piotr talked about, and virtuality, so the ability to perform in non-traditional spaces. So we already talked about cyborg theater, and Piotr talked a bit about the technology there, but you can kind of just see this visualization of how that works. We've got an AI that is listening to the actors on stage, giving them those lines. And in the context of the kids show, we've also got microphones that are listening to the audience and giving us feedback of their laughter or their boos, in our case for the kids show. That's then informing how the show proceeds. I'm going to skip over the tech stack. If you have more questions about the technical stuff, we can look at that more later. But let's jump into the kids show itself. So I'm going to skip through these. So how to train your robot. So in this version of the show, we're using live cinematics to create a story on stage. So actors perform in front of a green screen, and they're composited live in real time in front of AI generated backgrounds and foregrounds. And so the goal here was to teach young people how large language models actually work and participate in how ethically fraught they can be when trying to create with them. We add real-time virtual production techniques to the show, creating little movies of scenes improvised together with the kids, improvisers, and our artificial intelligence system. So our particular approach is what we consider de-anthropomorphized. So you'll notice in most children's entertainment, or entertainment in general, the robot is largely anthropomorphized. We have these characters that essentially operate as surrogate parents or teachers in the lives of young people. And we find that highly problematic. So in our show, we try to look at how we can break down the idea of the intelligence being a central figure. So it exists as a physical robot that breaks. It exists as a bunch of code on a screen, as a disembodied voice. And it exists in different modalities generating content. And so through this, we don't look at Alex as a person or as a thing, but as a distributed set of tools that we can use in different ways. So here you see the beginning of the show where we present our amazing first movie. We watched this movie that we generated. The kids all agree that it's terrible. And so that So we decided we have to make a new one. So here you see us getting, we've got a script that's been generated. The kids tell us what costumes to get put on. They get up, their directors, their script supervisors, and their sound effects operators. So we perform the scenes, and then we get feedback, and based on how good or bad it is, we create, we iterate into new directions. So it's just the intro of our show is this AI slot, which I'll skip for now. But so we see that we get kids on stage to perform. We put masks on them so we can kind of make sure we're talking about privacy issues and what it means to be photographed. And what the audience sees is the actors in real time being put into these virtual environments and performing. And so at the end of the show, it's revealed that Mad Dr. Replicate has been there the whole time, and that he's been actually guiding the intelligence systems, that all the plays that we keep generating keep on making the robot the hero. And we don't really realize that till the very end. And then we have a chance to confront Dr. Replicate, who makes fun of us because our movie is terrible. And then we have this question of, well, maybe our movie was terrible, maybe it wasn't. But how much fun did we have while we made it? What was the experience of making the movie? Is that valuable? Is that more valuable or less valuable than the product that was generated? And so this is our attempt to kind of move beyond the idea of AI as a tool for just generating things and more as an opportunity for us to get together and play. I think for time, I will stop there. I'm going to skip forward to... and I'll just, go ahead, just pause there.
Questions or things that's coming up for you all as you're seeing this? Yeah, go ahead.
What do you guys think is like the biggest benefit that you hope to gain from your work?
What is the biggest benefit that you hope to gain from your work?
Money and riches.
Unlike traditional theater improvisation.
Glory. No, that's a good question. I think, so what do we hope to gain? I'll take a stab, and then Piotr, let's see what you hope to gain. I think for me, it really is dialogue. I've always was interested in theater because of its ability, unlike a movie, to have conversations happen afterwards. Doesn't mean it always happens, but because we're all kind of together in a space, especially with youth theater, which I've studied for a number of years, I found that a lot more discussion happens around those themes, and a lot more critical engagement can happen. And so what I hope is that we'll engage more and more people with the larger complex issues of technology, not just moralizing it or polarizing it into one good or bad context, but deeply engaging with it, empowering people to use it in ways that are more beneficial to humanity. So for me, that's the main purpose is essentially dialogue.
Other questions, other thoughts or feedback?
Let Piotr take a stab at that as well.
It's there's a pleasure of hearing someone from the audience who may be working more in tech, who says, "Oh yeah, I'm going to take improv classes now," or maybe I should actually resume playing guitar, and also people from the theater world saying, "Oh yes, I like. Actually, I remember that I did like to tinker, so maybe I should try tinkering more." So it's essentially breaking a little bit the divides and barriers between disciplines, which we tend to put people into boxes, right? And that's something that really deeply offends me. I noticed this as a 10-year-old child moving from communist Poland to France, so moving from the second world to the first world. From a country, apparently there was no milk for children in Poland, apparently, according to France, which is completely false. We didn't have Legos. We didn't have Kinder chocolate because that was Western. And similarly, not everyone in the West was a pervert, which was kind of what was implied in the second world. So it's this sort of people putting me on boxes that really offends me.
Thank you. In our previous conversation, kind of prepping for this, you talked a little bit about the framework of how AIs kind of seem to, in some ways, to either elevate or kind of create a sense of kind of efficiencies. But you thought you mentioned that there's kind of this middle ground that you're pushing into, the idea of it kind of creating something brand new. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So a lot of the popular media looks at AI in the context of generating social media content, movies, music, so sort of these sort of fixed media. And at Improbotics, we're quite focused on understanding generative AI as something that is most, I guess, meaningful when it's involved in novel experiences that couldn't have been achieved without it. So rather than looking at how technology might allow us to do something more efficiently or more cheaply, or have a different type of gloss than it would have had otherwise, we're more interested in, well, what does an intelligent machine allow us to think about and to physically do that we couldn't do without it? And so in our cyborg theater, it's not that a robot is to replace a human, that to see, oh, can it improvise better than a human? What it is it allows us, sort of in the classical sense of what theater is a mirror, and it's a reflection of what's happening in society, but it's not a simple mirror, right? It's a slightly distorted mirror. It's a funhouse mirror is the way I like to describe it as. And in that funhouse, in that distortion, we can see a little bit more clearly the distortions that are actually already in our reality. And so we all talk with chatbots, and we've normalized that, and we watch it on stage, and we watch a group of actors conform to that robot on stage. We're able to not just simply intellectually see, but we're able to viscerally experience that shift and that change. And so in many ways, we're interested in documenting our, for lack of a better word, cyborgification. We're all becoming cyborgs as we rely more heavily on artificial intelligence for making decisions. And so this idea of performing with it, it's not if a robot can be funny, it's what is the humor that happens when we laugh at robots? What is that? Piotr and I just recently finished an article kind of about this topic, and you might want to talk more about it, but we're really looking at comedy is a political act. What we're allowed to laugh at is dictated by what is normalized. And so when people say something is or isn't funny, when a robot is or isn't funny, that's a political act. And we're really interested in how it's not about if that's good or bad. It's understanding, well, what is the motivation? What do we gain? What do we lose when we say this is funny and that's not funny?
Do you have some more you want to add to that, Piotr?
Yes. It's a question of friction and productivity. So currently there's a huge drive towards productivity. And actually, this is an example of, things from Improbotics I take into my day job. I really started focusing. So I'm very allergic as well. It's hot in here. Started focusing on the on friction, cognitive friction, even in my day job, actually. So which goes a little bit against the initial remit, you would think, of a technology company making things more fluid. And what's really delightful is when you use technology in a very deliberate way that engages actively the friction rather than simplifies a task. So the medium of comedy, the reason, the raison d'être of us doing comedy is actually a very good regularizer in our practice, because we will not just use AI. Oh, let's just make our poster on AI. No, actually, for 3 years ago, for the posters for Edinburgh, at that time I trained individual AI models on everybody's faces using local models for privacy, and so I generated cyborg images of each of us. But now, no, we just do the proper photo shoot in costume, because that sounded much more real. The music has been commissioned. But instead we introduce AI at specific moments where it creates more friction for the actors, as opposed to creating more fluidity.
It reminds me a little bit of Brecht and trying to not hide, trying to make things too, flashy, so you move beyond what's actually happening and what you're seeing. It also reminds me a little bit of Marshall McLuhan's framework of the medium is the message, and kind of how you're trying to communicate something impacts kind of what's being said. And yeah, but I love how you all are thinking about this in kind of such a deep and profound way, especially as, improvisation is often so thought about as, superfluous or kind of lighthearted, kind of just creation. And so I love the depth at which you're chewing on it. Other questions that folks have, or other thoughts or feedback? Yeah.
Talk about how like on stage, like when they're talking to like the robot, like it kind of mirrors like talking to like Chat GPT or like chatbots like and generative AI that way. Because like it's like actually like showing us doing that like directly rather than like in the comfort of our own home, like on our computer, like not thinking about it that much. So I guess maybe I want to ask like, do you get like maybe like I guess I know you also mentioned like doing a survey to like get like audience like, opinion or like what they maybe like how has like audience like reaction been like looking at the show, and like do you feel that maybe like they kind of like internalize and like think about it in their like I guess like afterwards, or is it or I guess like does it seem like more comedic in the moment? It's like I guess that's maybe not being thought. It's like that makes sense. I don't know.
Let me try to repeat it, and if I mispresent, let me know. But I think the question is about like how has the audience reaction been, and then is the audience reaction seemingly, if you've been tracking more beyond the survey, is it more seeming like just in the moment, or does some elements of the show seem to resonate based on and stick with people over a longer period of time based on what you've been noticing?
It's an excellent question, and something that we're deeply invested in. We're about to launch a big study. We're in the process of a study looking specifically at how audiences' relationships to AI might be changing over time. And so for the Edinburgh Fringe this year, we're going to be collecting data from every show that involves AI to kind of look at how audiences' reactions are changing, because they are changing in real time underneath us. A lot of our survey data is really captured a little bit of that shift of when most people were skeptical about AI to its now widespread ubiquity. I think it's changing so fast right now. It's we got with our young. I'll talk a little bit about young audiences. Let Piotr talk about the main show audiences. With the kids, we have a workshop that follows it where they use an app that we developed to create little movies themselves. Sort of with their friend group, and in those we get really interesting discussions. Largely, a lot of times parents will be the ones trying to weigh in, and then listening to young people who haven't quite formulated those questions chime in has been interesting. I think it's really diverse right now. I don't think there is a single way that people are responding. I think, especially with young people, there's actually a lot more fear than I would have assumed. There's a lot more, not so much. It's not just skepticism. They actually aren't using. They haven't been engaged. They haven't been given access to the full sort of creative realm. And then you've got others that are so deeply invested, young people who use it in a much faster, more superior way than any of the adults around them. And so I think we're seeing a really big divide that is affecting how they watch things on stage. We have a lot of references to youth culture, youth pop culture, TikTok culture. And if we're even like a week behind the kids immediately cringe out, and they recognize that we're off the mark. And so it's interesting how fast that audience is. And so to create content for young people now, you must be glued to social media to be able to understand the languages that they're using and how they're processing. Brain rot is a pure aesthetic now that runs deeply through what is funny. And so yeah, it's a moving target, especially for young people.
For adult audiences, well, 10 years ago when I started doing this, a friend of mine, an improviser, told me, Piotr, I hope you don't make it too good. Because basically, they recognized that the delightful aspect of it was when there were imperfections, and not exactly not this point of making it really productive or perfect, but rather just providing opportunities for comedic interaction. We had some good reaction from people thinking about education, like this is great because it demystifies AI. I think yeah, Nicola Osborne from Braid, Bridging Responsible AI Divides, an AI ethics organization based in Edinburgh, really liked those shows specifically because of that subtlety of not going into either extreme, either alarmism, being alarmistic, or just praising technology. We noticed that improvisers were in general very easy to please and convince because they get this they get the challenge of improvising with machines, and in a way, so we always had fantastic reception when we went to improv festivals, and that almost was a little bit a false signal for us. We as compared to general fringe audiences, which are the most general people just coming to see a comedy show, nothing else. Yeah. So and as a consequence, I think I've been trying different strategies to try to sometimes explain a bit too much, perhaps. It's not always helpful. I think we're going to try a different strategy this summer of just going with satire and irony instead.
Well, we look forward to hearing how that goes for you this next round at Edinburgh. And we are essentially over time, but I wonder if in like one sentence you could give us like a hope for the future that you have in terms of your work in the world of entertainment or improvisation or AI, like, or the amalgam of all of those which you're in. I know that's a big ask, but I know we're over time. So like about a sentence would just to close us out would be amazing.
Make stuff up.
Cool.
Yeah. Life's always been absurd. It hasn't changed. That doesn't mean we can't keep making fun things despite the meaninglessness of it all.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Let's give a round of applause for our folks. Thank you for Pure. I really appreciate both of you, and we'll continue the conversation and really appreciate how you're pushing the boundaries and thinking of these things in really innovative ways. So thank you again for joining us, and thank you.
Thanks for hosting us, and hopefully we'll see you in person sometime soon.
All right. Yes. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.